سارة، صار عندي حادث سيارة واتصلت بالمحامي قاجي.
قصدين انتي المحامي قاجي؟
يعني هذا المكتب اللي قالوا عليه أكبر مكتب محاماة عربي كلداني بأمريكا، قاجي؟
لا أنا محامي بالكاجي لا. أنا أعرف لورنس، هو قال لي كاجي لا.
أنا أعرف العائلة زين، يقولوها قاجي.
بعد أي حادث سيارة اتصلوا بيا، أنا محامي لورنس قاجي. 248-702-6641 248-702-6641.
أعزائي المستمعين، مساء الخير عليكم وأهلا وسهلا بكم في برنامج المحامي لورنس قاجي. طبعا مثل ما ذكرت عدة مرات خلال الأيام الماضية أنه تحول اليوم، يعني هالمرة إلى يوم الأربعاء، دائما هو الخميس، فنجرب الأربعاء بالنسبة لبرنامج المحامي لورنس قاجي، وإن شاء الله نكون عند حسن الظن مستمعينا الأكارم. معي في الاستوديو المحامي لورنس قاجي. Welcome Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you so much for having us this week.
وأهلا وسهلا Mr. John.
Thank you so much for having us. As always, it's a pleasure.
ودائما نرحب بالعزيزة الباراليغال الأخت العزيزة تمارا للترجمة. أهلا وسهلا.
أهلا وسهلا وأهلا وسهلا للجميع. وعيد اليوم الفالنتاين.
اليوم فالنتاين صدق.
يس، ونتمنى الكل دائما بسعادة وصحة وعافية
إن شاء الله يا رب، إن شاء الله على الجميع. طبعا اليوم ما أعرف حديثنا إيش راح يكون عن يا موضوع. طبعا راح تبدين أنت تبدين سكرتج للإخوة المحامين.
نعم، اليوم مالتنا الموضوع راح يكون من جزئين.
نعم.
الجزء الأول اللي هو منو يكون مؤهل ليكون عنده قضية لحادث سيارة. شنو المؤهلات اللي المفروض عند الشخص حتى يكون عنده قضية، حتى
يعني
تصير
لما واحد
قضية
يسوي حادث قصدك؟ وشنو هي مؤهلاته حتى يسوي قضية؟
بالضبط.
نعم.
وهمنا الجزء الثاني هو شنو هو العطل وضرر، وكيف تكون مؤهل لقضية العطل وضرر.
نعم.
بأنه أنت تضررت من وراء الحادث سيارة.
نعم.
شنو المؤهلات اللي لازم نوصلها أو النقاط اللي لازم نوصلها.
نعم.
حتى تكون أنت مؤهل لهالشيء.
ممتاز.
Today our subject is going to be of two things. Number one, it is what qualifies you for a car accident claim or a lawsuit. And the other one, it is what is a bodily injury claim and how do you qualify for it?
Right. And so, this is one of the major things that a lot of clients come to us, when they first come to our office, they say, I don't know if I'm qualified to present a claim or not, right? And I think we talk all the times about the different statutory requirements and things, but at the end of the day, what does it actually take to be qualified for a motor vehicle accident claim? And I think the simplest answer is, as far as just any particular motor vehicle accident claim, you have to be involved in a motor vehicle accident and injured. And that's it. I mean, those are the real basic requirements. You have to be in an accident, you have to be injured. Now, there are scenarios where you can be disqualified from being able to claim benefits. And I'm going to talk about those. But as far as just, do I have a claim? Two questions. Were you in an accident and were you injured? And that's it. And if the answer to yes is, if the answer to both is yes, you have a potential for a claim.
And you should have insurance.
Well, that's going to be one of those exceptions that I'm about to talk about. That's exactly right.
أكثر الزبائن من يجون يقول أنا صرت بحادث سيارة وما أعرف هل أنا مؤهل، هل عندي أنا قضية، هل يصير عندي قضية. أكو نقطتين مهمة، بأنه أنت كنت بحادث سيارة وأنت متضرر. هل يوجد بأنه أنت تكون غير مؤهل؟ أكو أشياء تخليك تصير غير مؤهل لما يصير عندك قضية، وهاي هسه رح نجي بالتفصيل ونشرحها.
نعم.
Yes.
So I'm going to start off right with the exception that you started talking about, right? You just said, well, what if they don't have insurance? And my answer to that is, some people without insurance are still qualified. In fact, most people are still qualified, even if you don't have insurance. The time that you are disqualified from having a personal injury claim is when you are the owner of a motor vehicle. Okay, you're occupying your own motor vehicle. Okay, and now you don't have insurance in that vehicle. So if you're driving, for example, on the road, this is the number one exception that we see all the time in our office, right? If you are driving and you're in your own vehicle, you're in a motor vehicle accident, and you don't have this, what's called the security required, which really just means the insurance required. That is, you don't have the minimum no fault coverage.
Yes.
Then that is one reason why you would be disqualified. But a passenger, for example, they don't have to have insurance, right? A passenger, like let's say you've got someone else in your car.
Yes.
They don't have to have insurance and they still qualify.
Okay. But before that, طبعا أي واحد عنده سؤال عنده استفسار يقدر يتصل بينا الآن على 586-825-2015 عنده أي سؤال عن حتى المواضيع السابقة يعني.
أي استفسار عن أي موضوع،
نعم.
عن أي شيء، أي جزء من المحاماة.
أي جزء من المحاماة
نعم.
يتصل على 586-825-2015 وطبعا رقم المكتب هو
248-702-6641 والاستشارة مجانية طبعا.
جيد.
منو يكون مؤهل بأنه يصير عنده قضية؟
نعم.
أنا أقول 99% من الأشخاص يكونون مؤهلين لعندهم قضية. إذا أنت بصرت حادث سيارة وإذا أنت متضرر بهالنقطتين أنت عندك قضية. الشخص الوحيد اللي ما عنده قضية
نعم.
هو بأنه هو يكون السائق وهو صاحب السيارة.
نعم.
السيارة باسمه وما عنده انشورنس. هذا الشخص الوحيد اللي يكون غير مؤهل إلى أي قضية.
نعم.
كل القضايا تسقط عليه. بس إذا أي أحد، إذا أنت كنت راكب، وإذا أنت كنت مو سيارتك، لو أنت كنت تسوق سيارة صديقك بهذا النهار، أكو هواية سيناريوهات بأنهم تكون أنت مؤهل إلى يكون أنت عندك قضية.
So I think the best way to think about this is there's some common sense things that kind of make sense as far as who's disqualified. So in addition to not being in your own car without insurance, right? That's probably a big no-no. But another thing that comes up very rarely, but occasionally, is an interesting situation. And I'm going to give you the example and you tell me what you think. Okay? So, someone has stolen a motor vehicle.
Stolen, yeah.
Okay? So there's a car sitting on the side of the road. He steals it. He takes that car. Okay, and then he runs off the side of the road, injuring both himself and somebody else.
Yes.
Let's say. Okay. So my questions to you are: the person that he hit, do you think he's probably going to be entitled to medical benefits, essentially? And then, do you think the guy who stole the vehicle, is he going to be entitled to benefits?
As you said at the beginning, you said most of them they have.
That's true. So, what's your guess?
I have no idea.
Okay, well, let's start with the guy that he hit. Do you think the guy he hit who's a pedestrian, let's say he has no insurance, is he going to get coverage?
Yes.
Answer is yes. And the great news is almost anyone, especially, I mean, in this case, he's not at fault either. So he's going to have two claims and we'll talk about that. Yeah. But the pedestrian, for sure, he's going to be covered.
راح نجيب أمثلة بأنه كيف واحد يصير عنده يكون مؤهل للقضية أو غير مؤهل. مثلا واحد سرق سيارة وساق بيها وضرب واحد دا يمشي. هل هذا اللي دا يمشي عنده هو مشاة؟ هل يصير عنده قضية؟ نعم. يصير عنده قضية وراح يصير عنده قضيتين، قضية للطبابة وقضية للعطل وضرر. بالضبط. هل اللي هو سارق السيارة هل هو عنده يصير هل يكون عنده قضية؟ نعم أو لا؟
أيوة.
Now, with that said, the guy who stole the vehicle, Lawrence, what do you think? As a general public policy, do you think the legislature is going to love people stealing vehicles and then getting
probably not
benefits? Probably not. Yeah, and guess what? That's exactly what the statute says. There's a specific part of the statute that says if there's an unlawful taking of the vehicle, you're disqualified.
إذا يكون سارقها أو ما أخذها بدون إذن، وهاي هم يسموها سرقة. يكون غير مؤهل، غير مؤهل إلى أي قضية.
But I also think that there's a
حتى لو هو من ضمن العائلة.
حتى لو هو من ضمن العائلة.
What was the question?
Even if he is a part of
the
a family that has insurance, because it was a stolen vehicle, he is disqualified from any.
Or he drove it without permission.
Or drove it. Yes.
Well, and that's what I was about to get to. Is this is the real scenario? It's not that we have a whole ton of people coming in saying, "Hey, I stole a vehicle and I want benefits." Right? That doesn't happen very often. But we do have sometimes our insurance companies who will dispute whether or not the vehicle was taken with permission. And I think that's one of these.
Sometimes after something happens, oh, well, I didn't give him permission to drive my car.
Bingo.
Yes.
And I think this is a huge point, because the insurance companies, the first thing they do, what do? They call up the person and say, okay, what happened? And then they say, oh, okay, so you got the vehicle from who? Your mom? They call up the mom and say, hey, did you give her permission to use that car?
No.
No, I didn't know she took it that day. Okay, well, now we at least have a potential problem. And not that that's necessarily disqualifying, because there are exceptions to that where, you know, she generally let her use it. She didn't have to ask permission. They were a close family. We can make arguments about that, but we don't usually want to get in a scenario where we have to do that.
مثلا تصير بهواية بأنه واحد يأخذ السيارة مال، مثل ما هسه أنت قلت، مال الأهل بدون ما أن يسأل. أول ما يسألون الانشورنس السيارة مال منو، أو مال أمي لو مال أبويا، رأسا يسدون التليفون يخابرون الأهل. هل هم سألوك؟ لا، ما سألتني. وبكل يعني براءة. اي، واكو هوايه يعني امثله بانه لانهم عايشين ببيت واحد، ماكو داعي. نقدر نسوي عده يعني سيناريوهات، بس رأسا الانشورنس تقول اوكي، ما دام انت ما منطي اي بيرميشن ما عنده قضيه، يسقطوها.
So, and then the next big one that's a disqualifier, okay, is basically operating a vehicle as an excluded operator. So you purchase a policy of insurance and then you say, this person will not drive the vehicle. Why would someone do that? To get a lower rate?
Yes,
right?
Yes.
I mean, that's the whole purpose. But then what if they let that person use the car? That's not a great idea, because you just excluded them from the policy. And now you're letting them use the car, which is what you told the insurance company you're not going to do.
The
insurance is not going to cover that. And so that's another disqualifier under the statute.
السيناريو الآخر بأنه هو إذا مثلا عائلة ومسمي الكل بالباليسي، لأن لازم تسمي الكل، بس تخليهم تمنعهم من أنه يأخذون، تمنعهم أن يأخذون أي شيء من هاي الباليسي. يعني مثلا ما يعني they will be ما لهم حقوق، لأنه هو كاتب بأنه هم صح عايشين بس هم ما حيسوقون السيارة، فما لهم أي حقوق من هاي الباليسي. بس الغلط اللي تسويه بأنه تخليهم يسوقون السيارة ويصيرون بحادث السيارة. الانشورنس هم تقبل تدفع، لأن أنت already يعني قطعتهم من هاي الأشياء اللي بالباليسي.
So outside of these exceptions, and there's also another exception for out-of-state residents, but outside of these general exceptions, everyone's going to be covered. Okay, so bicyclists covered, passengers in any vehicle are going to be covered, right? Semi-truck accidents are covered, motorcycle accidents are covered. I mean, basically everyone who's injured in an accident is going to be covered outside of these few exceptions. So, and by the way, what's important about this? Doesn't matter if you're at fault. You rear end someone, you still get your PIP benefits.
Hold on, John, before we get into that, so it seems like a pretty simple standard,
right?
I mean, you get into a car accident and you're injured, and you have a case.
Pretty much
outside of these, these main exclusions.
That's exactly right, and that's what we're trying to convey. I think here is
so why is that such a? I don't know. It seems a little too easy, I guess.
Well, that's a good question.
Because I've seen other areas of the law that some medical malpractice happens. There's no case. A slip and fall happens. There's
right.
No case.
Right.
An airbag, a very simple airbag, clear liability case. No case.
Yeah.
But if you're injured in a car accident, you have a case.
You have a case. It's just the way the statutes are written. I mean, it's really interesting. You're right. This is one aspect of the law. This was the original law. There were some amendments made, as we all know, in 2019, but the original law was put into place in the 70s. And the goal was to make sure that everybody who got injured, okay, with very few exceptions, everybody who got injured has a claim, has a case. So, you know, one of the things that I try to emphasize to people is, if you're not sure if you have a case, just come on in and we'll let you know. But the likelihood is good. If you're injured in a motor vehicle accident, you probably have a case. And at a minimum, it's going to be for your medical bills, right? Lost wages and all sorts of other things. Go ahead, Tamar. I'll let you translate. Sorry about that.
Thank you, John. You remembered me.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
ذكرني بالأخير بالأخير. So قال بأنه أي راكب ويا بسيارة حتى لو ما الراكب ما عنده انشورنس هو عنده مؤهل لقضية. أي شخص مشات دا يمشي وانضرب همينه مؤهل وصير عنده قضية. أي واحد على الباسيكل أو موتورسيكل همينه مؤهل يصير عنده قضية. أي واحد ببلوري بسماي تراك همينه عنده. بس المحامي لورنس قال إيش عجب كل واحد يصير عنده قضية من دعم بسيارة، بس إذا واحد مثلا الزحلق وقع مو دائما يصير عنده قضية. إذا واحد أكو عدة لأنه الغلط من الصناعة بالضبط من صناعة السيارة المانيفاكتشر أكو غلط هاي هم أكو قضية. أكو هواية سيناريوهات.
These doctors mess up and there's
خطأ طبي.
clear liability, but
yeah.
Medical malpractice
right
lawyer will tell you, hey, probably not going to be a case that I willing to take on.
It's true.
أكو الأطباء من يسوون يشخصون غلط بس هم ما عندك قضية لأنه مثلا حالتك
الصحية مو زينة
لا مو زينة بس ما تغيرت ظلت نفسها ما يعني ما صار شيء بالضبط. همينة ما عندك قضية. بس بحوادث السيارات قانونيا وهذا القانون اللي طلع بال 1970 بأنه
55 سنة
بالضبط دائما أكو قضية ما عدا هاي الأشياء اللي قلناها بالبداية أنت غير مؤهل لها.
I think I have some ideas about why most cases we do take on and we're successful with.
Mm-hmm.
So, Sada, as you know, there's two types of claims when you're involved in a car accident.
Yes.
One is what we call a first-party claim for your own medical benefits and going through your own insurance company. And the other one is what we call a third-party case, where you essentially would go after the at-fault driver for pain and suffering and certain benefits. So, first-party claim, it doesn't matter whose fault it is.
Right.
As long as you're injured in a car accident, you'll get those benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third-party aspect, there's always, usually, not always, but there's usually someone that's at fault for the accident. So if you can prove fault and you're injured,
you will get
you have a case too.
Yes.
So it's that simple. I mean, in layman's terms, it's that simple, and that's why you see a lot of marketing that goes towards car accident cases and not medical malpractice, not police brutality cases, because the likelihood of you having a case is more likely.
اوكي
مثل ما تفضل المحامي قال بأنه ليش حوادث السيارات لها أكثر إقبال مو إقبال بس يعني
تنقل القضية
بالضبط لأنه أولاً أكو إذا أنت مو غلطان لك قضيتين. قضية للطبابة وقضية بأنه للعطل وضرر. قانونياً قانون ميشيغان كل واحد يتعرض إلى حادث سيارة كل واحد للطبابة كل واحد يروح للإنشورنس مالته. فدائماً أنت عندك تغطية يصير. هاي وحدة. اثنين بأنه للعطل وضرر أكثر الأحيان يصير عندك عطل وضرر. يعتمد إذا اللي ضربك عنده إنشورنس لو لا وإذا ما عنده هل أنت عندك تغطية مال إنشورنس لهالشيء. فلذلك أقول احتمال مو دائما. بينما وتشوف الدعايات وكل شيء برا كلها على حوادث سيارات،
صحيح.
مو على
القضايا.
عافية الواحد الزحلق وقع، لو الميديكال مال براكتس الأخطاء الطبية، لو بالضبط لو برودكت لايبيليتي بأنه أكو أخطاء بالضبط، لأنه هي أكثريتها أكثر الحوادث السيارات بها قضية.
And I think it's worth pointing out too that Michigan is a little bit unique in this, right? A lot of states, the vast majority of states have what's called a tort system, right? Where the at-fault driver's insurance, well, the at-fault driver, but through their insurance, has to pay all the claims, right? That includes medical, that includes lost wages, that includes help around the house, pain and suffering. If in those situations, it matters. In those other states, it matters who's at fault to have any claim. In Michigan, because we're a no-fault state, the ability to have the claim for those benefits, specifically medical, lost wages, and help around the house, those are not dependent upon fault. And it's only the pain and suffering, which we will talk about in a little bit, it's only the pain and suffering where fault makes a difference.
مثل ما قلت بأنه ميشيغان، ولاية ميشيغان شوية غير مو شوية، كل هواية عن معظم الولايات بالضبط. معظم الولايات عندهم يسموه التورت، اللي هو إذا صار حادث هاي كلش يكون مهمة منو كان الغلطان، أوكي، لأنه الغلطان هو راح يدفع كل الطبابة وكل العطل وضرر، الانشورنس مالته طبعا، والمو غلطان كل شيء ما يدفع من جيبه. بينما ميشيغان لا، بالعكس ميشيغان كل واحد يروح عن طريق الانشورنس مالته للطبابة والعطل والضرر للطرف الآخر. هذا عادة هنا بميشيغان غير شكل عن باقي الولايات.
And, I think a lot has to do with, Michigan, I tend to see kind of higher limits on policies than other states.
Yes.
So, for example, in Florida, they have a $10,000 PIP minimum.
Yeah, which is for medical expenses, right?
And in other states, I've seen bodily injury limits as low as $20,000.
For sure.
Our limits are higher, so it's definitely a good thing for you. You got to pay a little bit more on premiums, but you'll be covered. I think for the most part.
لذلك احنا نقول دائما خاصة اكثر الناس من يتحولون من غير ولاية الى ولاية ميشيغان، وهاي شنو الانشورنس تدفع عالي هنا بميشيغان، لانه التغطية للطبابة وللعطل وضرر عندنا عالية. احنا هنا للطبابة تبدي اقل شيء 50 و250 وعندك غير محدود بالضبط، وبينما للعطل وضرر تبدي ب100. باقي الولايات عندهم مثلا بس 10,000 للطبابة فقط وللعطل وضرر بس 20,000. ما يعني لذلك الانشورنس مالتهم همين قليل وما تحصل اي شيء.
I got a call recently. It was an accident that happened in another state, and it was a tort state as well. And the policy limit for the other driver was $20,000.
Yes.
Our client didn't have any UM coverage, or the person that called me. So it's just imagine, you have a $20,000 policy. You have to pay your medical bills out of that. You have to pay essentially everything that would go towards a first party case here. And then not going to be much left for you at the end of the day for your pain and suffering.
Yeah.
Right?
It's exactly right.
Medical in different states is less than here, the expenses?
Okay.
Or
so
they are the same.
Are you asking if the medical bills that people receive are less, or if the medical coverage is less?
No, receive.
Okay. So it depends. So as with everything, there are differences between each state in the price of goods and services. I have not seen that there's a substantial difference in my experience, but I want to put a big caveat on this. I'm a Michigan licensed attorney. Okay.
Yes.
I practice almost exclusively in Michigan.
Yes.
I have seen and worked with some other firms, especially outside counsel, on out-of-state cases. And I have seen some of the bills and things that people incur out of state. From what I have seen, they seem pretty comparable. So I don't see a huge difference, but that is not a scientific study. That's just from what I've seen.
Here it's more expensive.
Well, here
and the cover is Like here, it's, as we said, 50,
Well,
250 or unlimited.
So I think what's
There
important,
it's 10 or 20. That
Yeah.
means it's
Right.
nothing.
right? So I think what's important to understand is the mandated coverages here tend to be higher, although post 2019 that has changed a little bit because there are ways that people can completely opt out of their coverages for first party benefits. And if you do that, then you won't have that coverage that we're talking about.
اوكي سو سؤالك كان استاذ ساهر بانه اذا انت بغير الولايات الفاتورات الطبيه اعلى من هنا لو نفسها
لو نفسها.
بالضبط. سو بالمجال اللي محامي جان بي واللي هو يشتغل تقريبا 100% لميشيغان، بس همينه مشتغل الى يساعد مرات او يشوف قضايا خارج ميشيغان. البلات تقريبا نفسها،
نعم.
الطبابه نفسها، بس التغطيه غير شكل.
نعم.
التغطيه مع الاسف وراء ال 2019 من تغير القانون صار اكو فقره بالفقره ميشيغان بالقانون مال ميشيغان بانه انت تقدر تطلع روحك من الطبابه بانه ما عندك تغطيه للطبابه، وهاي النقطة الوحيدة اللي هسه ما تقدر تاخذ بها طبابة، بس لأنه أنت طلعت روحك opt out from medical. بس كشيء آخر بأنه 10,000 20,000 باقي
وهاي المشكلة يعني مقارنة بالمبالغ اللي تحصلها أنت في أمريكا في ميشيغان.
بالضبط.
سوري.
بالضبط. ميشيغان التسوية مالتك تكون أكبر من لأنه البلات اوريدي تجي كلش عالية. إذا أنت عندك 10 لو 20 راح تروح كلها للبلات، ما يجيك أي تسوية من عندها، ما يجيك أي تسوية بعدين.
So then the next thing that we're going to talk about a little bit here is specific to the bodily injury claim and how do you qualify. And I want to make sure that I'm being clear here. There is any claim as in a personal injury protection claim. And the qualifications, as we said, generally speaking, are just that you are injured in a motor vehicle accident. But a bodily injury claim, which is basically for pain and suffering, has additional requirements beyond that.
اوكي سو النقطة الأخرى اللي قلناها بالبداية بأنه إذا أنت عندك عطل وضرر، هل أنت مؤهل؟ لازم كل المؤهلات اللي قلناها للطبابة لازم هاي تكون موجودة، زائدا إلى إضافة إلى أكو بعد مؤهلات لازم أخرى تكون موجودة حتى تكون مؤهل للعطل وضرر.
So first I have to start off by saying, well, what is a bodily injury claim? How's it different? Well, a bodily injury claim is a claim, as I said, for pain and suffering. But what is that? It's basically a dollar value that's assigned to you for how much pain and suffering that you've endured as a result of someone else's negligence. Okay, so it's a dollar value for pain. And that's not a specific regular economic damage that's usually associated with PIP claim, because you can't say, well, hey, this doctor bill is $600 and my pain, the bill that I wrote up was for $1 million, right? It's a little bit more complicated because no one's writing a bill.
اوكي شنو العطل وضرر؟ العطل وضرر هي قضية بأنه أنت تضررت من وراء حادث سيارة، الغلط مو غلطك وشخص ثاني سببه. هي عبارة عن قضية إلها رقم، ماكو بيها بلات، ما بيها أي من هاي الأشياء، فقط بها رقم بأنه يحطون رقم إيش قد أنت متضرر وإيش قد الضرر يسوى من وراء هاي القضية.
Now, the first big requirement is fault. You cannot be more than 50% at fault, okay, in order to have a bodily injury claim. Now, there could be 5 different people all causing an accident, okay? You don't have to show that one of them is more than 50% at fault, okay? But you have to be less than 50% at fault. So if you are hit by 5 cars, okay, rear-ended 5 times,
Yeah,
I'm not saying that's going to happen.
Always.
Yeah, hopefully that doesn't happen to you. But if you are rear-ended
No, it
5,
happens.
but it does happen.
Yeah.
I mean, it does happen. If you are rear-ended multiple times in an accident,
Yes.
okay, each one of those people may be a percentage at fault. The first person that hit you could be 30% at fault. The next person could be 20% at fault. The next person could be 10% at fault. The next person could be 10% at fault. The next person could be 10%. You get the idea, okay? None of them are more than half at fault for all your injuries because there's so many different people that hit you. But as long as you're not more than half at fault, then you have a bodily injury claim.
كيف تكون مؤهل بأنه أنت عندك عطل وضرر؟
نعم.
أولا بأنه أنت مو غلطان، تكون مو الغلط مالتك مو أكثر من 50%.
نعم.
أوكي، إذا أنت غلطك أكثر من 50% ما عندك عطل وضرر. بس إذا أنت غلطك أقل من 50% أنت تكون مو غلطان، والغلط على اللي ضربك. مثل ما قلنا هنا مرات على الهاي واي يصير كلش زين واحد يوقف 5 سيارات بالضبط، لو من يصير ثلج وآيس همينة تنزحلك سيارات واحد يضرب الآخر. سو يعتمد على أهم شيء أنت يكون مو أكثر من 50% الغلط عليك.
Yeah. Now, the important thing here, though, is to also understand that you can be attributed a percentage of the fault. So, and I'm going to give you a little more complicated example than you got rear-ended, right? So let's say you come to a stop at a stop sign, okay? And another car comes to a stop at the exact same time at the opposite side, okay? And you both want to turn. You wave them on to go first. They say, no, you go first. And they wave you on. And then you say, no, you go. And then they say, no, you go. And then you both move at the same time. You both hit in the middle. Who's at fault? Yeah. Well, the problem here is, well, A, it's not really clear, okay, because I don't know who waved last. Mm-hmm. But let's say that the jury can't figure it out either. And they say, you know what? You're both half at fault. That's not good.
Each one 50-50.
50-50 is not good. You don't get any claim there. You have to show that the other person that you are less than 50% at fault, basically, in order to have the bodily injury claim. All right. So the fault does really matter here.
الخطأ لازم نأكد من الغلط يكون، لازم أنت الغلط مالتك أقل من 50%. مثل ما قال المحامي كمثال، اجى واحد وقف على الستوب ساين ومقابله السير الاخر هم يعني اجى وقف مجال.
We could just shorten up this example. We could just say that two cars are driving and they both switch lanes at the same time.
Sure.
Each other.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of I like Lawrence has a much better example.
Yes.
But the bottom line is, when fault isn't clear, right? It's going to be apportioned. Yeah. Okay, and you got to be less than 50% at fault.
Right.
So كل واحد يأشر بأنه تفضل أنت فوت وأنت فوت، وبعدين داعمه من تصعد للمحكمة العليا القضية. هيئة المحلفين ما يقدرون يقولون منو الصوج، يقولون نص بنص مكافئ. ماكو قضية. لازم أنت أقل من النص غلطان.
زين شو يسوي ذاك الوقت مثلا؟
So
what he will do that time?
What will we do in that time if it is 50-50?
It's 50-50.
Well,
and you don't have any claim.
Well, so what we will try to do is gather evidence to make it so that it's not 50-50. Okay, we will get testimony from the parties. If we think there's a claim that's a possibility for having a bodily injury claim, it's very rarely exactly half. Everybody is exactly equal, because usually one person, let's take Lawrence's example. I like his better. Okay. So Lawrence gave the example of two people are changing lanes at the same time. Well, that's fine. But where did the actual impact occur? In other words, was the car in the right lane already established, where the person in the left lane, they merged into that right lane? Well, that might be more the person in the left lane's fault. Okay.
Yeah, more than 50.
And it's very rare when I find a situation where I think, boy, these two are exactly equal. I don't think that usually happens, because there's always timing aspects to things, right? Somebody put on their signal, they were waiting to get in there, the other guy was impatient. Okay. So I think that in most cases, what you do is you really look at the more specific facts in detail, and you try to determine who you think is more at fault.
بهيك حالة من يكون هو الغلطان؟
نعم.
طبعا المحامين هنا يجي دور المحامي بأنه لازم يثبت بأنه الزبون مو غلطان، ولازم ناخذ مثلا المقول الاقوال مالتهم، اذا اكو صور، اذا اكو اي شيء تثبت بانه هو اقل من 50% غلطان. مثلا المحامي لورنس قال اذا دا يمشون سوا وكل واحد يريد يغير اللين مالته والضاربه همينه منو فتح الاشاره اولا، جاهو اكثر يميل الى اي صفحه، وين صار الضربه اللي قدام بالنص اللي ورا، هاي كلها تدخل بعدين اشياءات اكثر. بس مال 50 ب50 جدا جدا قليل.
Yeah. You know, the best experience I've had with these cases is, you work them up as best as you can, and you try to resolve them before you go to trial, because you just never know what a jury is going to do.
Right.
Whenever there's liability issues, the best thing to do is settle your case out of court. Hopefully you get a good number.
Right.
It's not going to be the best number in the world because liability is an issue.
Right.
But I do think at the end of the day, these are better settled than going to trial and kind of risk having the jury pick one side over the other, as in regards to what happened in the accident.
I think that's a really good point.
بهيك حالة المحامي يجي دوره بأنه يحاول بأنه يسوي تسوية للقضية قبل ما تصعد للمحكمة العليا، لأنه ما تريد تحط القضية بإيد المحلفين اللي هم ما لهم أي يعني معرفة بالموضوع ومو اختصاصهم.
نعم.
بس راح يقول إيه هو هذا سوتشة، لا هو هذا سوتشة. بالضبط. فهيك حالة نحاول بأنه احنا نسوي تسوية بالضبط.
Yeah, and I think just to add a little bit onto that, because Lawrence made a really good point here. If it's mostly a he said she said situation, so let's go back to this changing lanes example that Lawrence gave. If driver on the right side says he turned into my lane, driver on the left side said he turned into my lane, and there's debris all over the road and you can't tell. Maybe
what about the camera? It will work.
Nah,
sometimes there's no camera.
If there's something very clearly that shows, right, if someone's got a footage, then sure, you're going to evaluate it. But again, if it's a he said she said situation, do you want to roll the dice with 6, 7, 8 random strangers who you've never met, okay, and hope that they side with you? And the answer is maybe. Right, it depends on the settlement offers and the situation, but I think settlement is something that you absolutely want to consider when there's a dispute as to who's at fault. Yeah.
مثل ما ضاف المحامي جان بأنه أهم شيء بأنه نسوي التسوية قبل ما نصعد للمحكمة العليا، لأن ما تريد تخلي القرار إلى 8-9 أشخاص ما لهم علاقة بحادث، ما لهم علاقة ولا عندهم أي خبرة بهذا المجال. أحسن شيء بأنه نسوي التسوية قبل ما نصعد للمحكمة العليا.
Now, one of the other big exceptions in terms of when people would not be eligible for a bodily injury claim is if it was an intentionally caused harm. So this is a situation where someone intends to cause bodily injury by intentionally running their car over somebody. Insurance companies don't cover that. It's an intentionally caused harm. So, hopefully that never happens to anybody.
It happens though.
But if it does, I can tell you that more likely than not, you're going to have a prosecutor, and there's going to be a criminal case as opposed to
from insurance.
No. It would be a prosecutor would be from the state. It's be, for example, people of the state of Michigan versus somebody.
Yeah. النقطة الأخرى اللي يكون ما عندك أنت قضية بها عطل وضرر، إذا كانت الحادث عن طريق يعني مقصود، مو حادث. واحد مثلا متقصد بالضبط، يشوف واحد يمشي بالشارع وإجا ضربه لأنه كان أكو عركة بيناتهم، لو واحد طالع من بيته دا يرجع بقوا على القسطني ضربك، لو هاي الشغلات وتصير هاي همينة، هاي بهيك حالة بعد ما تكون حادث سيارة تصير جريمة بالضبط لأنهم متقصدة.
This doesn't come up very often, but every once in a while you got a really angry boyfriend or girlfriend
Friend.
situation,
هاي ترهم
إيه.
and then the
هو-
insurance companies start arguing it.
Yeah.
It doesn't come up very
صديق
often.
دز لنا رساله يقول نحتاج واسطه من المحامي.
We got a message, I think, on Facebook.
Oh, wonderful.
As he said, yeah,
question.
then we need like
to talk to them.
talk
I
to
will
a-
talk to you.
talk to a lawyer.
Oh,
We need to
yes.
talk to a lawyer.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Look, I mean,
Get
at
the
the end of
lawyer
the day,
favorite.
you know, our consultations are always free.
Yes.
Yes.
So why not give us a call? You
Right.
know,
Yes.
قلت له
to
خابر.
ask us anything.
اتصلوا اي وقت تتصلون على الهواء اذا يعجبكم، لو تتصلون للمكتب انتوا يعني حتى تكون
على 248-702-6641.
نعم. مثل ما قلنا الاستشاره مجانيه، ما بيها شيء. مرات 5 دقائق تنحل المشكله، ومرات نحكي 10 دقائق لو لازم نشوف بالقضيه ونرجع
كلها
نتصل.
مجانا.
كلها مجانا.
نعم.
Well, they can also call us right here on the radio at 586-825-2015.
You are right.
Aha. Anyway.
البارحة واحد خابر. Someone called yesterday.
Oh.
I gave him the number. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
But we're happy. But truly, we're happy to take on all callers, all questions, anytime.
ويقدرون يتصلون بينا 24 ساعة.
24 hours.
يس 24 ساعة بالنهار. اكو خطوط، يعني الخطوط احد يجاوبها أو
خلال
يعني
24 ساعة.
بالضبط. يعني بين 9 و5 المكتب يجاوب، وبين 5 و9
الانسر ماشين.
اكو شخص
إيه.
يجاوب، ونقدر ثاني يوم رأسا.
يحول. إيه.
بالضبط.
Okay. So to recap, right, we're talking about a bodily injury claim. You have to be injured in a motor vehicle accident. You have to be less than 50% at fault, and it can't be an intentionally caused harm so far. The next thing is you do have to have insurance. Okay. If, again, you're driving your own motor vehicle, just like in the prior statute, there was an exception for, if you own your own vehicle and you're an occupant in that vehicle and you're injured in that vehicle, you do have to have insurance. You are disqualified from both PIP and bodily
I would
injury.
say that's probably the most common reason that we reject the case is when someone had owned a car that didn't have insurance. I would say that is the most common.
Owned and were occupying at the time of the accident. Right?
That's the most common way that you'll be excluded from benefits.
Yeah.
ملخص الحكي بأنه إذا أنت شلون يصير عندك قضية مال عطل وضرر. أولا بأنه تكون أنت لازم صاير بحادث سيارة متضرر، وعندك يكون أنت مو غلطان، واهم شيء بانه انت عندك انشورنس. اكثر شيء بشغلنا احنا وبالمكتب مالتنا ما ناخذ القضيه لسبب، اكثر السبب هو اللي عندنا اللي اعلى شيء الماشي، بانه انت الشخص السياره باسمه وهو ما عنده انشورنس. هذا فقط المناخذها. بالضبط.
And I just want to add, we can argue about who's more at fault, right? That's something you can argue in front of a jury potentially. You can argue about whether or not the harm was intentionally caused. I mean, these are things you can argue, but it's very hard to argue whether or not they have insurance. Most of the time, if you just didn't buy insurance and you're driving your own car around, that is what it is.
Yeah. مثل ما قال المحامي بأنه إحنا نقدر يعني نحكي ويا الحاكم بأنه أنت ما كنت غلطان، ونقدر نثبت هالأشياء، بس أكو شغلة واحدة ما نقدر نثبتها، بأنه أنت هاي السيارة مالتك وأنت ما مشتري إنشورنس. ما بها أي مجال نقدر نحكي ويا الحاكم على هالشيء.
Yeah,
I've had a couple instances where our client believed they had car insurance, but purchased, what we call a street policy.
Yes.
Where it's not a real policy. So someone took a premium and they weren't an agent or whatever the case may be. They never got insurance. So make sure that you're buying insurance from the right person and that you have proof of insurance and all that good stuff. Oh yeah. Yes.
نعم. القضية السيناريو الآخر اللي يصير هو همينه الشخص يتوقع هو عنده انشورنس ومشتري انشورنس ودافع لشخص على اساس هو مسوي له انشورنس، بس هذا الشخص مو صحيح، بس ما اخذ فلوس. فالمهم بانه تشتري انشورنس من مكاتب الانشورنس وينطوك اوراق وتوقعها. اذا ما موقع على اي ورقه لا تحسب الانشورنس. بالضبط.
Now, okay, so let's assume for a second that we've got a motor vehicle accident.
Yes.
You know, you're not at fault. No one tried to hurt you. There was, you had insurance on the vehicle that you were in. Everything's good. Okay. So the one last requirement, which has three parts, but the one last requirement in order to have a bodily injury claim, again, that's for pain and suffering. Okay. Monetary damages for pain and suffering. That is that you have to have what's called a serious impairment of bodily function. Okay. So not everyone that is injured in a motor vehicle accident necessarily will meet this serious impairment threshold question. Only some.
اوكي احنا قلنا بانه العطل ضرر بانه انت تكون بحادث سياره وانت تكون عندك انشورنس ويعني وصلت كل هالاشياء، بس اكو شيء جدا مهم بانه انت لازم تكون متضرر الى جزء مهم بالجسم. متضرر الى جزء مهم بالجسم. إذا أنت ما متضرر والجزء مو مهم بالجسم معناته ما عندك قضية.
هو شيء مهم بالجسم.
بالضبط. وهسه نجي نحكي شنو هو.
Now I will say, in addition to serious impairment of bodily function, you could be, there are really three things. You could die. Death automatically qualifies you for a bodily injury. Permanent and serious disfigurement. So if you have a major scar down your face, you're going to automatically qualify for bodily injury as well. But the very few cases well, I shouldn't say very few, but there are comparatively fewer cases of those types than there are where we're arguing about what's called the serious impairment of bodily function. Loss of limbs, those would all, you absolutely would qualify.
شنو الاشياء اللي تخليك بانه انت عندك قضيه؟ of course اسم الله اذا واحد يتوفى، اذا واحد يعاقه يعني بطول الحياة، جسدية إعاقة، إذا عندك مثلا جرح جدا كبير يبين، إذا عندك أي كسور بالجسم اللي هي راح تسوي لك إعاقة دائمية. هاي الأشياء يعني مبينة إذا أنت عندك. أكو غير إعاقات بس هذيك هاي يعني هاي مو بس نمبر 1، بس حتى ماكو داعي تدافع عنها بعد، يعني مبينة. بس أكو هواية بعد إعاقات اللي لازم تدافع عنها بأنه هي هاي موجودة.
Okay, so what does it mean then to serious impairment of bodily function? Well, the number one and most important thing is it has to be objectively manifested, meaning it is observable or perceivable from the actual conditions or symptoms by someone other than the injured person. Okay, so what does all that mean? It means if I look at you, I can see you got a problem, or if a doctor looks at you, or if someone other than yourself can see it. So pain, this is the most important thing I think people don't quite get. Pain by itself is not enough because I can't see your pain, right? But a diagnostic test could, right? A doctor could be able to see it. Or if you were limping, that might be something objectively perceivable. But pain by itself is typically not considered enough to meet this threshold.
Okay. من نقول إلى العطل أو الضرر يكون إلى جزء مهم بالجسم، أولا لازم يكون مبين. لازم مو بس أنت تحس بهذا الشيء، لازم غير الشخص يشوفه. بالضبط. الوجع مو كل واحد يقدر يشوف الوجع عند الشخص اللي يعني أمامه. لازم الطبيب يشوفه بالتحاليل اللي تصير. مثلا أكو قسم هواية يبدي يعرج، لو مثلا ما يقدر يستعمل إيديه، لو مثلا يصير عنده ضرر بعينه، بإذنه، بوجهه، بأي جزء من الجسم يبين بأنه هو عنده عوق. والعوق مو إلا عوق مستمر، بس يعني لازم يكون مبين.
So now, isn't this interesting? So think about this for a second. So what we're claiming for is pain and suffering. And yet I just said pain by itself is not enough. Isn't that interesting? And the reason is because it's about evidence, right?
Yeah, because nobody knows, only you.
Right, exactly. So what evidence can we gather for pain? Well, that's where That's where
you
this
have to see the doctor.
That's where this exactly right there. That's where the standard comes in. You have to see a doctor, get diagnostic testing. You have to do something to show that there's evidence of that pain, of that suffering. Maybe it's mental suffering, right? But you still have to see somebody and they document it.
مثل ما قلنا العاتق يكون على المحامي حتى يبين للإنشورنس هذا الشخص مو بس عنده وجع ومتضرر، شلون راح نراويه اياه، هاي شلون راح نثبتها. الاثباتات تجي ناخذ مثلا الاشعه، بالتقارير الطبيه مال الطبيب، اذا تاخذ امراي، تصوير طبقي، تصوير مغناطيسي، تسوي مال اعصاب، هوايه اكو شغلات نقدر وحكينا مره بيها شنو الاشياء اللي تقدر تسوي بيها. فهاي اللي راح تثبت بانه انت مو بس عندك عوق، بس انت همينه عندك وجع، بانه انت ليش؟ لانه الوجع ما ينشاف بالضبط.
And we can explain kind of how to work up your case in order to
Yes.
prove these certain things, right? We can
Yes.
explain it to the clients. Sometimes we get a client that's signed up with us, 8-9 months after the accident, no
Right.
MRIs, and they're going to have a hard time,
Right.
with
Linking their injuries to the accident.
with the third party case without any objective findings, and sometimes it's hard for clients to understand, but that's what the law says.
Right.
That's what you need.
هواية ناس ما يعرفون مثلا يجونا ورا مثلا فد 6 أشهر 8 أشهر من ورا الحادث، هل تعالجت؟ لا بس أنا عندي وجع، هو ما متعالج. هاي شوية صعبة، لأنه لازم إحنا علينا الإثبات بأنه نثبت بأنه هو عنده عطل وضرر، بأنه هو متضرر ومتعطل بجزء من جسمه. هواية الانشورنس تشوف ورا مثلا 6-7 أشهر ما مسوي أي تحاليل أو أي شيء، راح تقول منو قال هاي من الحادث؟ ليش تحملت هالقد؟ ليش سوي؟ تصير صعبة، أقل التسوية مالتها لأنه صار فترة، وهاي كل مرات الزباين ما يقبلون يفتهمون هالشيء.
Or sometimes it just happens too late in the process, right? Client gets an MRI a year after the accident. Right. So
even 10 months is too long.
So, obviously the insurance company is going to argue that, it could have been related to something else. They could have slipped down the stairs and fell. How do they know, what happened?
Or aging.
A lot of things happened, within 9-10 months. Right. They're obviously going to try to put the blame on anything else that happens.
Right.
لذلك احنا دائما نقول للزبون اذا عندك طبيب وبدك تسوي علاجات، روح سوي خلال مدة قصيرة الأمراي، لو سوي تقارير طبية أسرع وقت ممكن، لا تعطل 5-6-10 أشهر لأنه الإنشورنس ما يقبل يدفع. Yes, sorry.
And this is the big difference between the being eligible for a PIP claim and the bodily injury claim, right? So you could go to your primary doctor, they can take you off work for a month, but then if you never go back, never get any MRIs, never have any diagnostic testing done, you may not at all be eligible for the bodily injury claim.
Now we are done.
Okay.
نشكر المحامي لورنس قاجي.
Thank you for having us this week.
وشكرا.
Thank you so much, as always.
تشكرين ست تمام.
يا أهلا وسهلا.
مستمعينا الأعزاء، مشاهدينا الأكارم، طبعا خلص وقتنا، وإن شاء الله نلتقيكم في الأسبوع القادم. مستمعينا ومشاهدينا الأكارم، أذكر رقم تليفون المكتب، مكتب المحامي لورنس قاجي 248-702-6641. إلى اللقاء يا